Okay, so I'm gently breaking our own rules here. We were just nice and neatly working our way north to south along the Dalmatian coast of Croatia, and so the next along from Šibenik would surely be Split, or Trogir even, both of which we will get to, but for reasons that are not that interesting, Split was not our next stay. You see, with travelling, we learned early on you want to be sleeping at least vaguely in the same town as your return flight. Compounding flights with like an overlong bus journey is no fun, and it's almost always unnecessary if you just rejig your itinerary slightly. So we took the bus south to Split and actually had a few lazy hours to kill there, but we didn't explore too hard because we were getting on a boat to Korcula. Now, I wish I could say I knew about this place by sheer force of sexy personality, but if I recall, I think I heard about it from the Tsar of high trousers himself. I am concerned that if Rick Steve's trousers encroach much higher, he may suffocate. More to the point, them's is Venetian fortifications, so as if you have to even ask by now. There's a couple of ferries from Split every day. It's about 3 hours there, and coupled with the departure times, it just doesn't comfortably allow for day trips. You've got to stay there at least a night. The way the ferries worked out, we had about 34 hours, and that includes 2 sleeps. Now, this is not the Channel Islands, and I'm not making some sort of attempt at a lap. Korcula is about 47 kilometres long, so that's pushing a 100-kilometre walk. The island itself is actually modestly empty. After docking briefly at Var, which we're getting to another day, we progressed at length away from the mainland. And even after we drew level with the island, it was still going to be over an hour before our destination would come into view. For the most part, Korcula is just one karst mound to another, all blanketed with trees, with occasional houses sprinkled near the edge. The ferry paused in the rather inauspicious town of Podgorica. Even though a few people got on or off, it appeared to just be a small coastal resort with pretty much just a supermarket and a jetty. As we progressed on, in the distance, the mountains loomed out of the water. As we already explained, many of these islands are pretty much mountain chains in their own right. It just happens that the salt water of the Adriatic filled in the gap between them and the mainland. But not to be contrary, the mountains you're seeing here are actually part of the Peljasak Peninsula, which would be amongst the islands, except for a tiny connecting strip of land connecting it to the mainland around the town of Ston, and that is most definitely a story that we are getting to. At long last, the town that shares its name with the island was close enough to get a look at. This is Korcula town, which was, amongst other things, a powerful Venetian outpost, which is where some of the more striking architecture comes from. So just as the sun was sinking low, we passed around to the far side of the fortified port and came to a stop. We were just in time for another incredible Adriatic sunset, and we were itching to explore, so after searching for our Airbnb, we found out it wasn't actually numbered. Yes, in an old town like this, there's only a few hundred yards across in each direction, and numbering the buildings doesn't appear to be a priority. But with a bit of negotiation, we eventually figured it out. We dropped our things, got changed, and headed back out the door to see the town at dusk. Now, I was holding off shooting too much as the low light wasn't going to be the best way to capture the town, but we could already tell we were going to be in for a treat. The atmosphere was just incredible, and we got really lucky. You see this tower? So this is part of the island's fortifications. Well, guess what is at the top of it? Up a staircase, past a lounge and up a ladder, and you are seated on the roof with space for maybe 20, 30 absolute tops at a squeeze in a cocktail bar. And we just couldn't believe this. Like, how did they pull this off? Where else in the world can you approach the local authorities and say, hey, so you know that iconic piece of this small town's heritage? Yeah, we'd like to make that into an incredibly cool little drinks venue and actually get it approved. Like, that never happens. And it gets better. Unsurprisingly, that ladder is not conducive to a tray of drinks. And excuse the change in aspect ratio for a second, but you really couldn't capture this in landscape. We did try. Rope and pulley system on the outside of the building. I mean, this place is just too freaking cool. And I mean, what an impossibly beautiful evening to be out. That's got to go down as one of our all-time happiest. We didn't stay up there all evening, as there was a lot of people wanting to come up, so we descended to ground level, where the circumference of the old town is ringed with restaurants. And being me, of course, I had to grab an espresso. This was okay. I mean, this was primarily a pizza restaurant, so not expecting it to change my life. And hey, I was already so ecstatic from the evening, you probably could have served me Nescafe and I still would have drunk it. Actually, no, sorry, that was wrong of me. I misspoke. Nobody deserves that. The town had a great vibe. It just all felt wonderful. But after 4.5 hours in transit, including the bus from Šibenik and then the boat, we were pretty much ready for bed. It wasn't exactly an early finish, but, well, early to bed, early to rise makes me... Well, okay, it doesn't actually make me healthy or wealthy, but it does make me ready to be out the door at 5:30 a.m. to catch the dawn. And this was a great morning. Found myself sitting on a rocky beach at the far end of the old town, and it was unbelievably peaceful seeing the sun ease up. Then, exploring the town before anyone was around, the ferry from last night was all gearing up to leave by 6 a.m, and tomorrow morning we'd be on that one, but for now, we had the whole day just to take in the place. I mean, hey, break into a sprint. I'm pretty sure you could get end to end in under 2 minutes. So let's have a quick tour. I reckon we've got time. This is the main gate, also something of a selfie central when the town gets moving. Behind you are the more modern buildings of the town. To your right is the main ferry departure point just under the Tower of All Saints, which was being renovated while we were there. To your left is this eye-catching bastion and tower. Anyway, if you head up the bridge, then that's the Governor's Palace, just on the left there. Then there's a central street with invitingly enigmatic side streets branching off either side. You'll then be at the central square, which contains the rather spectacular cathedral. Then down some steps and you'll be at the tip and the cocktail bar that we saw the previous night. Continue clockwise. Those are the restaurants we mentioned. They're well positioned for a pause to drink in the view, and they're on top of the city walls. But if you head anti-clockwise, the city walls have been partially demolished, mainly to make way for a hotel, and then you'd be back around at the gate again. So yeah, it's pretty easy to keep track of where you are. This is definitely no Šibenik, with its street plan that feels like it was designed by MC Escher while on DMT. So having already filmed most of what I needed from the town, I could kind of take it easy for the day. When Jen stirred, we had a quick pastry and espresso from the Steps Cafe with a view of the gate, low-angle flag shot. The coffee was not all that spectacular, but the bill was low and, look, you know the rules. If it's perched at a beautiful viewpoint, I am much more accepting. Plus, this was pretty much the only spot open around 8 a.m. So we headed to this very small bank of stones that serves as a beach and had a bit of a swim. Jen stayed in the water for a while I wandered off to get more shots. I know it seems like I'm repeating myself here. It seems like most restaurants in the island get supplied by these Monty guys. I don't think it was all the same blend, mind, but for what it's worth, this espresso was kind of weak. I really doubt they had a proper machine in there, but hey, to speed things up, throughout the day, I pretty much ended up getting espresso from almost every restaurant along this stretch because, I mean, why the hell not? We've got time. I will admit, since this trip was a little while ago, I've changed my approach nowadays. I used to think I was doing something insightful by sampling all the espressos I could get my hands on. Thing is, while my consumption hasn't dropped, I've got a bit more selective about where I drop in. You see, in the UK, we're sort of accustomed to having coffee shops that really focus on coffee and maybe some other things on the side. In Europe, it can kind of be the opposite. It sort of depends where you are. Like in Athens or Crete or even Palermo, they've got a bit of a coffee scene, so, you know, there's places really dedicating themselves to it. But in other places, you could get 20 espressos from 20 different restaurants, but none of the places would be really putting in much time or attention into the coffee. It's kind of an afterthought, just another loose menu item. Look, I know I rarely shut up about the coffee in Greece, but most recently we were in Santorini, and despite all the stuff that's happening there and the huge footfall, there were surprisingly few dedicated coffee spots. There was a few in Fira, but in Ia in particular, it's a bit of a coffee desert. Anyway, back in Korcula, this is from a couple of years back, and it's almost endearing to see past me trying the coffee from nigh on everywhere. So I was casually banking more footage as the morning went on. When you're making these episodes, you can never really have enough coverage to pull from. By about 11, I decided to wander up the hill. There's a fortified Venetian tower up there. And if you find this bench, well, there's your view of the town from above. Man, I really love this place. I mean, Of course, it could be a lot further, but Korcula is not exactly straightforward to get to compared to some of the other towns on the Adriatic. Which is why, when I look back at these shots, I feel the pull to go back, but alongside the knowledge that with it being suitably out of the way, it's going to be a while before we can get back there. But at least one day, we definitely will. I took a loop of the road round the other way, which is definitely the dumb option if you're on foot. But as it turns out, the roof of this mall parking lot also gives you a pretty good view. So it was about lunchtime, and I said I wasn't filming food for this series because, really, do you need to see a picture of the pizza I opted for because it was 65 kuna and one of the cheapest things on the menu? Well, no. But on this occasion, we actually opted with something local. These are cevachipi, or something close to that. It's a Slavic thing. Basically, somewhere between meatballs and sausages. I mean, yeah, somewhat greasy, definitely satisfying, worth having at least once. We also took the time to enjoy the view, which is also what we did for most of the afternoon. There's not much more of a blow-by-blow to give you, as the compact size of Korcula gave us a pretty easygoing day. But I was umming and ahhing whether or not to bother, but since we're on Korcula and I'm filming this for all of you, it would be a bit weird if I didn't include the one thing that is a bit of a famous Korcula spot. However, okay, this is labelled as Marco Polo's house. So it's been put forward that Korcula may have been the birthplace of Marco Polo, but there's quite a few people quite robustly disputing this. The balance of proof seems to land pretty squarely that he was born in Venice. And even if he wasn't, the Korcula theories are not well attested at all. The house, as it stands, is quite quick to point out that it's been rebuilt several times since the Middle Ages. And half of it was actually kind of a building site when we went. So it's about 2 staircases, a couple of info boards, a bust, and then just this top, attic tower space, which is frankly too small to get a wide-angle shot while you're sitting in it. If this had been more than 20 kuna, I'd be pretty pissed. Let's recap. The rebuilt building that may have once been Marco Polo's home, if he was here at all, which quite a number of voices are saying he wasn't. That's not very good provenance. But hey, we paid basically £2 for a historic house with a view. I am mostly okay with that. Suffice to say, my first impulse was that you're not missing much if you skip this one. Then again, there's not super tons in Korcula, so maybe like us, you're just looking to fill 20 minutes. Anyway, ice cream in the square, sat enjoying the view a while longer. Look, I know this is not skydiving, but hey, this is what having a more laid-back day looks like. Through the course of the day, we ended up passing through the entrance courtyard by the Governor's Palace several times. This cat was asleep there early in the morning. By mid-afternoon, it had got as far as here. A couple of hours later, he'd even inched his way to here. And then towards the end of the day, he was back asleep where he started. That is workflow, people. This guy gets it. So we're pretty much at dinner, which didn't merit filming, but was pretty nice. We had just one last thing we'd been waiting to do, and that's to climb the bell tower of St. Mark's Cathedral. Didn't feel quite as sure-footed as the Zadar bell tower. The stone stairs were fine, but when you got to the top, the metal lattice floor did not fill me with confidence. And then the thin, empty steps to the last bit, even less so. Felt like you could easily post yourself like a letter through those gaps and fall 10 meters. Still, the views from up top were spectacular. As the tower was getting pretty busy, we actually descended back to sea level for the last bit of sunset. It was the perfect end to a near-perfect day. And that's pretty much the end of the story too, as by 6 a.m. the following morning, we were back on the ferry to Split. Okay, so closing thoughts. Well, it's not the hottest of hot takes, but yes, in a stunning turn of events, Korcula continues to be exceptionally beautiful. You can see most of the old town in a morning, which is basically what we ended up doing, but at the same time, you can then take a lot longer to appreciate it all, and since there's no quick way to get to Korcula, it makes sense that you might want to savour the moment. But yes, there are a ton of activities to keep you occupied beyond day one, so you're making your own relaxation, really. That's not really my area. I'm the guy running around with the camera, and then once I've filmed everything, I start getting a bit restless. But for goodness sake, don't take that as a negative. I keep underlying just how gorgeous Korcula is, and it's genuinely one of the locations that Jen and I speak about with the most fondness. And yeah, no coffee that really stood out, but that is a pretty low priority when you're somewhere this beautiful, and I feel like having the coolest cocktail bar I've been to kind of offsets this. And of course, as we led the episode with, this is really just a review of the town of Korcula. I feel fairly confident saying that the town is somewhat unique on the island, unless they are keeping it very quiet. There aren't any other gorgeous fortified Venetian outposts perched on the coast. The interior is pretty bare. The other main tower is Villa Luca, which looks nice enough, but apart from a large cave, there's not a huge amount to see there, though by all means, if you wish. Anyway, even with our brief stay, Korcula is an incredibly special memory. Now, in our story, our next stop was Split, this time to actually stay, but while we're in these waters, it seems like we should pop in on the other spectacular Venetian harbour in the area. Next episode, we're going to do a bit of a compare and contrast when we stop in Var. So, all of these are going in the Balkans playlist. Definitely check that out for more episodes from Croatia and beyond. Please subscribe if you're not. We are just starting to get an audience for all this, which it means a huge amount. So if you boost the signal by hitting some YouTube buttons and leaving a comment on all that, that would be amazing. If you enjoyed the music in the background, that's ours. We make all the music for these episodes, and you can find them all on bandcamp.com. If you want to support the channel, that's the place to do it. And of course, social media exists, so find us on all of those. Otherwise, we'll catch you for the next one.